So our next panel or our next session is a conversation between two very inspirational people. It will be moderated by Bruce Daisley, who is an author and also the host of the Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat podcast. Also a former VP of Twitter. And so I'm really excited for this conversation between you and Elizabeth. So I hand it off to you and have a great session.
Thank you, Sammy. Right now, I'm absolutely thrilled to be introducing the guest I'm going to be talking to today, because Elizabeth is a proper inspiration. I like to keep tally of the amount of books she's published, and we'll work our way through that. But by my reckoning, she's set to have 5 books out by the time she's 30. So shout out to that. Let me introduce her. Elizabeth Uviebinené, Liz, is a multi-award winning author, speaker and columnist at the Financial Times. Her debut bestseller, which was a real phenomenon, Slay in Your Lane, The Black Girl Bible, she co-authored in 2018, was nationally and critically acclaimed for giving voice to the next generation of young Black British women by Vogue. She's co-editor of the anthology Loud Black Girls, 20 Black Women Writers Ask What's Next. But her new book, and the one that I think is incredibly timely, the book we're going to be talking about, especially today, is called The Reset: Ideas to Change How We Work and Live. It's a manifesto that investigates our urge to work in a way that suits more parts of our lives, for which she's interviewed some of the most exciting business leaders and thinkers working in the UK today. I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Uviebinené.
Hi, Bruce.
How you doing, Liz?
I'm good.
Lovely to chat to you. Now, just to give a shout out right up front, there's going to be opportunity for people to ask questions, both on the CogX website and on YouTube. So feel free to throw your questions in the sidebar as we go. But Liz, thank you so much. I tell you what, I've been seeing this book everywhere. I think, in this book, in writing The Reset, you've really touched on something that feels immensely timely. And so the question then becomes, anyone who knows publishing will know, you foresaw some of these conversations a year or two ago. What inspired you to write the book?
Thank you so much for the introduction. Before I had the original idea to write The Reset, what was the real inspiration behind it was just me seeing so many young people and so many people from marginalized backgrounds leaving, I guess, the traditional workspace and citing the same reasons: inflexibility, burnout, not feeling like they can, bring their true selves to work, and a lack of belonging in the workplace. So I was, I guess, seeing all these trends in statistics and also culturally. So I did a lot of panels off the back of my first book and met so many different types of people. And unlike my first book, which spoke to the fact that, Black women found the workplace, incredibly difficult and challenging in various aspects, what I saw on the book tour while meeting different types of people was this wasn't just, about Black women. It was something that was a ticking time bomb in all our workplaces and all different types of people. So in 2019, December, a few months before the pandemic hit, I started putting together this proposal, and I really wanted to back then it was called Out of Office, and it was speaking to the fact that the workplace needed to change for so many reasons, and we couldn't go on like this. So it was timely, but it was something that was bubbling underneath.
And so when you say that, when you talk about effectively, you're speaking, would you describe it as generational? Is there a generational disaffection with the way that work has been constructed? Or is this just actually systemic? Are a lot of people starting to recognize that the way that we were working before was flawed and there was something inherently wrong with it? Is there something generational in it? Or is this more universal?
I think it's universal, and I think the difference is with the generations is the advocacy and how our voices are used to kind of speak about these issues. So you'd find a lot of millennials and Gen Zs are more vocal, and I think that was a kind of clear kind of distinction that I found around the workplace. So and I think I don't want to paint millennials and Gen Z as revolutionaries, because by any means that we're not. But I think that we have a real kind of this isn't going, we want to change things. And I think we want to use our voices in order to kind of affect the change as well. So rather than going with the flow, there was a real kind of like, well, if I can't change things on the inside, working my job, I'm going to leave and I'm going to, to be an entrepreneur or go freelance. So what you found was rather than, going with how things were, there was either I'm going to, either talk about it at work and use my voice, or I'm going to do something outside of work and go down the entrepreneurial route. But, we can't all go down the entrepreneurial route. We have to kind of change work for the better for all of us. So I think the generational differences come down to how much more vocal we are.
Yeah, there's something strange, I think, on reflection, that, when you see people leaving a cult and they say, we didn't know we were in a cult. And I think my feeling when I was reading your wonderful book was that, actually the way that we were working before had characteristics of being in a cult. And it felt like it was this collective suspension of disbelief, because if we did that, we could hope to maybe one day get on the property ladder, or hope to one day get promoted out of sort of this subsistence existence. Do you think work was a cult in the way that we were building it before?
Yeah, I know we've had this conversation before around, the way work is it kind of zaps us from our agency, some of the workplaces and offices, the culture that we have. And I think I've said, many times that we kind of default to a, parent-child relationship where we kind of are divorced from, our voices. And, similar to some, to cults, cults, there is a real element of, I'm just going to continue to do this just because it's always been this way. And not a lot of people are asking questions. And I think that what always confused me about the way the office and the way things were pre-pandemic, and even when I graduated, was just this lack of investigating about the way we do things and why we do them. And I was always that person that would always kind of like ask questions, like when I first graduated, and say, why do we do this like this? Why do we do it like that? And it was very much like, it's always been done this way. And I think that somehow it's now become, the blind leading the blind. And we've all kind of ended up in this weird kind of like, toxic mix of loneliness, burnout, anxiety around the way we work. And somehow we're looking at each other and saying, how did we get here? And we're looking at the cult leader and like, who got us here? And it's like, we all got ourselves here, sadly.
It's spot on. I couldn't agree more. There's a really interesting sort of paradox that runs at the heart of the way that business has been run the last few years, is that everyone who's been exposed to working in a business environment has been told, you need to be ready for change, you need to adapt, and then the moment we have this systematic change forced on business, the people who are the most resistant to it, the people who are the most resistant to workers now working from home, are those people who used to preach the mantra of change. Effectively, change was something that happened to other people when it came to the management class. And I think, they've been caught surprised by it. And the reason why I mentioned this to you on an email before, the reason why I sort of mentioned that cult thing, I don't know if you saw that tweet over the weekend. There was a VC, a San Franciscan VC called Jordan Kong, who tweeted, unpopular opinion, but the best thing young people can do early in their careers is work on the weekends. And they added a couple of tweets down. It didn't come without costs. I gave myself pre-diabetes working 90 hours a week. I mean, like, if someone is professing that other people should somehow inflict bodily harm on themselves like they have, it just strikes me that, we are in a cult. So work definitely needed this reset thinking, I think, to come along.
Yeah, and it's so shocking. First of all, I just find the tweet incredibly tone deaf off the back of just a pandemic, that the fact that we're still functioning and we're still being able to kind of do our job is a freaking miracle. And I just think that the pressure that, if I was working for her, I just didn't understand like how I would feel reading that. It's not a badge of honor to have, to do that to your body. It's actually the opposite. It's ludicrous. So I'm quite alarmed by the fact that she had the confidence to actually tweet something like that. And I'm so glad that, you know, within reason, people kind of pushed back on that and said, no, that's not what we want. Like, we have to, the way, what we're doing to the planet, what we're doing to our bodies, everything, it has to be sustainable. Like, that is basically the future of work. There's a well-being and a sustainable element in that. And if you don't understand that, you're just going to be phased out like a dinosaur. And because I believe that, you know, as the workforce is right now, it's intergenerational, interracial. There's so many different people, and I believe that because of this makeup of where we are right now and where we're going, there is going to be a real incredible kind of pushback, and I just think it's just, you know, the fact that burnout, there's a study that talks about burnout being the average age of burnout, is 32. Like 32, we saw the co-founder of Monzo step down a couple of months ago, citing, you know, stress and burnout as a reason. And I think he's definitely in his early 30s. So this isn't a flash in the pan. This is a real discussion that we're having, because it's a very serious one. And it's not, you know, conversations like that doesn't really add to the conversation. It just kind of distracts from it, really.
I think the thing that adds to the appeal of your thesis and the book that you've written is that you've spoken to so many people who, you know, people like Sadiq Khan, people, sort of chief execs of businesses. Was there anyone who, when you spoke to them, they had a clear way to articulate the way out of this? They sort of gave you the 2 or 3 things that you think we could most easily do, rather than just an attitude change. And I recognize that, you know, that's probably the first step. But are there some actions that you consider probably that should be on political manifestos and things like that?
Oh, political manifestos.
I'm determined. I told you before, I'm determined to push you into politics, aren't I?
I know, because you asked us on your podcast as well, didn't you?
Yeah. We need you.
Not in that sense around like, I guess, this is the steps by step, because I guess there's so many books that are written around, you know, and there's so many wealth of literature around burnout and some of the, you know, away from it, some of the challenge, some of the things that we can do in how we work and how we live to make better decisions. And I think what I enjoyed speaking to I enjoyed speaking to everybody. Well, stuff that stood out for me was Cassandra Stratebu, who's the founder, and CEO of Propercorn, those amazing snacks. And she spoke a lot about builder mentality within her organization and transparent communication, and how, as a leader, being kind of confessing and saying, I don't have all the answers, we're kind of, you know, and kind of instilling a new version of leadership in how, this was pre-pandemic, in how she communicated with the people that worked for her, but also in, you know, rather than having that, you know, this is how things are going to be done, having a real open, transparent communication with the people that worked for her. And the way she spoke about it, and she called it builder mentality, I really kind of enjoyed that, because it was very different and refreshing from, I guess, some of the, I worked for large organizations before, and it was very refreshing because it didn't feel as if like she was just, I guess, she's in the business telling everybody what to do, but it's also about bringing people along the journey, and rather than, you know, considering that level of presenteeism that we find in so many organizations, you know, checking in as opposed to checking up on, and all of these different things, it just means that people have autonomy. There's a real kind of zap of autonomy and agency that people don't have within their work. And you find that, you know, there's studies that speaks the fact that the more control that we have over our lives and our livelihoods and our work, the more happier we are. But so many people, there isn't that kind of synergy. So I really enjoyed speaking to her, because she was just so, you know, very, you know, fresh and forward thinking in how she approached that. I enjoyed speaking to the Channel 4 CEO, Alex Mahone, as well, just because she spoke about, you know, the fact that diversifying her business in a way that, you know, moving Channel 4 HQ to somewhere like Leeds, and how important that is for, you know, the output on screen, but also in the makeup of, you know, what we see in the business. It's kind of ludicrous, you know, that a business as large as Channel 4 was, you know, only centered so concentrated in London for so long. So I think with every person I spoke to, it was just about diversifying, not just the makeup of their company, but the output on screen, the output in, you know, in businesses, and how that's basically where we need to go, rather than this kind of like closed, London-centric, very, you know, because we can see that it's not working in that way. So The Reset's a really interesting book because it does talk about the individual, and it starts there, but it doesn't end up there. It talks about, you know, society and culture within businesses, but and various parts. And I guess it tries to empower the individual to make better choices, not just about how they work, but why, but also the businesses that they choose to buy from. So if you choose to buy from a business more sustainable, and a business that, you know, that and all that transparency, because I think that's the future. We want to know, like, you know, who we're working for, their values and beliefs. And some people are, you know, don't really like that, but I believe that that's where that's what we're going to see.
So just thinking about how you said that, the people that you've been inspired by have, to some extent, broadened the network of influence within their business, either by adding more voices or by making sure that all of the voices in there were being heard. And effectively, they're sort of becoming a broader network, a broader community of the people contributing to that business moving quicker. And is that what you see on the societal level? Because obviously, you know, there's been some really intriguing changes over the last 12 months. You know, both you and I live in and around London, and, you know, almost the sort of avowed comment of anyone in and around London was almost you had pride in not knowing your neighbours. And now we've found ourselves, to some extent, being part of a community, whether it's, you know, seeing people on doorsteps or being added to WhatsApp groups against your will. We found ourselves sort of somehow forging connections in spaces that actually we almost relished the anonymity before. Do you see that having an impact too, that sense of broader networks that extend into our neighbourhoods and districts?
Absolutely. I think I wrote a piece in the Evening Standard a few weeks ago talking about how we've all become locals now, and the kind of, you know, the old school thinking about, you know, when you are embedded in your community, there's a real kind of sense that you're not forward thinking, you're not future looking, that you're quite insular, and I think that, you know, there is that kind of, if you're town thinking, that you're not, I guess, intelligent and all those things, and I never really bought into it. I live in Croydon, and there's a real, you know, community feel that I've always kind of like enjoyed living. And before the pandemic, I was obviously freelance, so I kind of got a head start on the kind of 15-minute living I talk about, in 15-minute city living that I talk about in the book, and other, you know, and I do believe that there's a real sense of, like I said, spirit. Community spirit, there's a real sense of togetherness that we just was losing. And I just don't believe that. I think in London especially, you have so many different cultures and people living side by side, but you don't know people. And I think that as much as we pride ourselves as being, you know, a diverse country, diverse city, and all of these things, but there's a real kind of friction because there's still a real lack of empathy and understanding. And I think that what's happened with, you know, the past living situation of the last year is we've had to kind of like dig deep within ourselves, but also within, you know, our local communities, because that's essentially people and community. That's essentially what will, and relationships, that's what essentially, you know, will kind of guide us through the best of our lives. So I think that ultimately I definitely believe that that's going to keep, that's going to stay, and I hope that it does, because I think there's so much benefits in how we do that, and also how that translates in how we work, and how fulfilled that we're going to be.
There's a question here from the online viewers. Grace Fian says, how do you think we can bring these ideas about healthy work up, even at the early stages of our jobs, maybe such as even an interview? Could you bring those things up in interviews, or what would you suggest, a way for someone to audit whether a place they're going to work is just, you know, as part of, signed up to this sort of manifesto or not?
I think one of the ways that what I like to ask people, who did this role before, what were their reasons for leaving? So I think that's always a good kind of, for me, did they leave to go somewhere else, or did they leave, and what were their kind of reasons? And obviously there's limits to that, because, you know, they're not going to say, oh, they left because we were working them to death. That's never going to be the case. But it's really good to have, for me anyway, a sense check about the person that was doing the role before, or the kind of mood of the team. And I think that definitely, I think places like Glassdoor and like those kind of like online places where you can see what people's reviews are about the company, that's also, I find, quite helpful. In the interview stage, I think it's good to be transparent and just ask the questions, like what does a good week look like in terms of like hours, and just be more forthright. I think that I was saying in the book, I talk about culture a lot, and I say that culture for a long time has been kind of modeled on, you know, perks and, you know, ping pong tables and slides in, you know, fancy offices and Friday drinks. And those are nice sprinkles on the top, but I want to know about real policy, real things that are going to help me do my job better, but also sometimes outside of work as well, to live well outside of work. So I would ask about real company benefits, as well as like real company things, as well as just, you know, the kind of seductiveness that you kind of see on websites, or what they like to lead with. Like, you get a day off on your birthday, that's great. But if I'm working 7 days non-stop before my birthday, my birthday isn't going to be great. So kind of ask questions that kind of dig deep away from the perks.
And obviously you're a Financial Times columnist, so you must be thinking all the time about how business is going to evolve, how, you know, even beyond what you've captured in the book. Do you have any thoughts about, we're in this really strange moment at the moment, fascinating for me. There was we're starting to see examples of workplaces suggesting what their new policies are going to be. And it's normally sort of the boardroom has decided what the new remote policies are going to be in combination with HR, and they're unveiling it to teams. And what we're starting to see is a little bit of collective dissent. You know, not saying that we all work at Apple, but it's really interesting that Apple came out, Apple employees, about 3,000 of them contributed to a letter saying this solution that Apple had proposed, which was that people were going to be in the office 3 days a week and they had 2 days a week to decide what they wanted. Employees came back and said, that's just not good enough. That does not reflect this renegotiated relationship of trust and productivity that we've established in the last 12 months. And they said, not good enough. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that from elsewhere. I chatted to one advertising agency yesterday, and they said the employees had come back and said, no, we're not going to do this 3 day a week thing. So to some extent, there seems to be like this extraordinary moment where a non-unionized workforce are trying to at least push back against the way that corporations and companies and organizations are laying down the rules. How do you see that playing out?
This is like an ongoing thing, and I think it's an interesting debate, discussion. And honestly, I'm living for it. I talk a lot about the fact that we are divorced. We do believe that we don't have a voice at work. And I'm so excited to see that people are like coming together. I wrote a column a few weeks ago for the FT talking about, you know, the future of work is people, and are our voices coming together. You know, having that one person that kind of talks, that, you know, sticks their head above the parapet at work isn't gonna move the needle enough, because there's a lot of backlash that can come with that. So I was saying that what we can do are informal unionizing and ways to kind of like, you know, away from your manager, the person, you know, everyone's reporting to, like, and, you know, get on a Zoom or some sort of online and talk to each other and say, what worked for you and what didn't? Like, how can we go back together and kind of, you know, basically say, this is what suits us, and this is how, rather than this is what suits the individual, one person, because I never believe it's enough. So I'm so excited by this, because they're going to have no choice but to listen. We have to renegotiate this relationship, because we're never going to get this chance again. And I find, I'm quite excited by it.
To some extent then, is it like, to simplify, there's a linear scale that I guess individualism is at one end of the scale and collectivism is at the other. And we moved over the last, 2 decades, but maybe even longer, inexorably towards individualism. And And right now we're in a moment where actually through maybe the sense of community that we've seen locally, the sense of affiliation that we've seen with sort of identity groups and people that we're surrounded with giving us strength in real life and in work. And broadly, the trend is we're moving back towards a degree more collectivism. Is that what's happening here?
I do believe that, because and I talk about it in the book, where we talk so much, and I think my generation as well has been very, very guilty of this, where it has been very much focusing you, the self. It's been very much self-care. Everything has been so focused on the individual that we've kind of realized that, we're not the strength in numbers, that there's strength in our voices coming together. There's real strength in checking upon your neighbor and because you're going to need one day someone check upon you. And like we've kind of been so focused. I understand why, because we've been so focused about trying to catch up as individuals because of where we are from an economic standpoint in our generation, that we've kind of become very, very much insular. And I believe that we're doing ourselves a disservice, because as I think there was a study that you shared in one of the newsletters that I really love, talking about the fact that the fight for flexible working is an equality issue. It's not just based on, I want to come in on a Monday because it suits me and that's it. It's a fight for all of us. And, it's a fight for, better diversity, talent. It's a fight for, the stuff's, sexism, race, all of these things, because we see that companies that have the most rigid flexible working options, if you can call it that, are companies that tend to be, led by men and white men and, straight white men. And we have to ask ourselves why. Why is there a real kind of like rush to kind of get us back in the office and do the exact same thing? Who was it serving? So I think that, what we could definitely make sure that we kind of come out this time doing is making sure that we are kind of oscillating away from the individual and more so around, collectivism and community, because no man's an island, and you're only as, what is the saying? You're only as strong as your weakest team member. Well, yeah. So I think that honestly is a kind of, no man should be left behind. And I think that even beyond just the workplace, we saw that going into the pandemic, there were so many people that were kind of like being left behind, and we're realizing that when during the pandemic, the kind of what that looks like, and it's just not a society that we all want to live in.
Yeah, you're so right. I was on this CogX thing on Monday. I thought, CogX is going on, intelligent people, and they had the chief exec of Rolls-Royce on there, and he was here trying to greenwash his company's reputation, trying to pretend that they're not responsible for vast amounts of carbon pollution. And so, like as is the form on these things, he turns up and he talks about the project that's 0.05% of their investment. But anyway, the profile of him as sort of a late 50s white man, I thought, the fact that this is the CEO class and the fact that platforms like CogX give platforms to these people, no doubt he gave CogX lots of money. But the fact that we're giving voice to these people, I don't meet people like this all the time. They're not a representation of but they are the CEO class. And it's just this strange thing at the moment. We seem to be governed from the 19th century in the sense that the people responsible for the decisions politically, the decisions business-wise, are this cohort of people that just don't represent the strength, the diversity, the richness of opinion that is abundant, surrounds us everywhere we go. Boardrooms should look like the buses you get on. They should look like, this collection of people who've all got fantastic contributions. And I think, that's the thing I take inspiration from your book. Actually, if we do plug into these networks, if we do have the appetite to seize the moment we're in for a moment of reinvention, actually there's massive opportunities from it. It's an optimistic moment for me. I certainly, from reading your book, I felt optimistic.
Yeah, and I think, thank you so much. And I think that everything you said is just on point because, as the saying goes, talent is everywhere, opportunity is not. And, I've had so many good things that have happened to me over the last couple of years of my career. And that's because of, people, the people that put me forward. And there's a real kind of like, you should do this because, people believe in you. And I think that I just hope that, more people because more people kind of see in each other what what needs to be seen, and just more understanding and more empathy, because I think that ultimately we all have something to offer, but not everybody gets to do that. And that can sound really wishy-washy and very much idealistic, but we need to, it's just, I could go on and on about it, but it's something that I'm, incredibly passionate about, because I wouldn't be here if I didn't have people that were putting me forward, and people that were a real kind of like sense of community behind that. So I think that we definitely need to kind of step away from the old modes of like leadership and relook at that, because I think we're so hell-bent on what a successful leader, what a successful business person looks like, and it's still very much stuck in the 1920s.
Absolutely. Liz, you're an inspiration in many ways, because a lot of us sort of wait for permission to get things done, and we've not even talked about Slay in Your Lane, which is this phenomenon that's had an impact in two big ways. Firstly, it's opened this category of books, and it's demonstrated that there's a whole market of young Black independent women who are ready to have their voice heard, and actually sort of, I mean, you've created, you and Yomi have created a category by doing that, and sold formidable amounts of books. But I guess along the way, the story of that book to me is a demonstration, or one of the stories I'm going to call out now is a demonstration of how culture loves stealing from the subcultures, but not necessarily giving credit. You had that issue with the BBC coming to and taking your Slay in Your Lane title and using it as their advertising campaign. Did they ever apologize for doing that?
Oh, Bruce, why would you ask me this?
I can't answer for legal issues is a perfectly acceptable answer.
You know what? I think that what I learned the most about that situation is there is a real sense of disconnect from, like you said, people who create culture and create new ways of doing things, and people who have power, and therefore they don't need to kind of play that back. So and give credit where it's due. So the whole ordeal was very, I guess, stressful, and it wasn't a nice thing to go through. But I think, like I talk about so much, community, we didn't, from a moral standpoint of view, the BBC kind of admitted that from a moral point of view, they should have done that. From a legal point of view, in the way, the way the world works, we were on the cusp of that. So they couldn't out and out say we did anything wrong, but morally they did. And you find that a lot in people who are setting up businesses at the moment, a lot of entrepreneurs with fresh ideas. And what you find is, you see that in fast fashion a lot. You see that in music, you see that in culture, where the little guy is essentially ripped off and has to kind of, take a step back, because you don't have the legal, reins and things to kind of go for it. And also it's exhausting. So I think I'm so happy that what we came out of the situation was people online, on Twitter, generally kind of saying, you ripped that off to South London girls who came up with an idea in their bedrooms, and everybody knows it because we had the receipts, we had the kind of, journey that people saw. So I think ultimately, we won.
What I find really strange about it is that, that old thing that people who are most likely to buy the big issue as the people who've got the least amount of money. It's almost like it's this thing where, actually the people with the least to give seem to be the ones who give the most of it. And, you and Yomi have gone out of your way to put these 20 Black women writers on in your book, poets and writers, all manner of these people. And you've extended the success that you've had, you've extended the hand to try and put that on. And it's just extraordinary to me that a platform like the BBC that can create these moments of people feeling like they're getting a fleeting glimpse of the spotlight. They didn't say, we want to give respect to these young writers from South London. We're going to credit them. It just feels remarkable to me that, actually they can't have the grace to recognize that. And I guess that's a lesson for everyone who's watching today, really. What can you do, the people watching today, what can you do to use your power to actually reach out and give the stage to other people? And I do hope that, people consider their own privilege and think, what can I do to share the stage with other people in the way that you've really advocated and inspired in that regard? tell me this: you've had such incredible response to the book. We're in the sort of the last few minutes now. Has there been anything that's really sort of surprised you about the reception of it? I've seen you everywhere. You've clearly caught the zeitgeist, caught the moment. Has there been anything that's really surprised you?
Oh, it's a very good question. It's been out a month and a bit now, so I'm trying to think. It's a very good question because I haven't been very much reflective because I've just been like back-to-back events and doing different things. I'm most excited by the fact that people are messaging me and asking about, I'm most kind of like happy about people rethinking the way that they're working and why, and not just based on their 9 to 5, but making better choices. And I think that that's what, for me, I really want people to kind of come out of this book reading, and not just only my book. There's so many other books and there's so many other literature at the moment talking about the future and work and how we're living. And I believe that above all, we have the power to make better choices. It doesn't always feel like that. We are, we can make incremental changes to the life that, we actually want and life we desire and deserve. So I think that all the nice messages that people message me, I love the fact that people are thinking differently about the choices they make, because choices shape society. Like, people uphold systems. Like, we actually have it embedded in us, but for so many reasons, which we won't go into, political, economic reasons, so many reasons, we are kind of divorced from that agency, and we're kind of being seen as, cogs in the machine, divorced of agency and divorced of like free will. And this is the time that we can essentially push back and be optimistic, because we've seen that this isn't working. So if we don't change it, and if it's not you, then who? And I think that that's the kind of feeling I've had throughout my career. If I don't do something, then who is? And I think at the moment we're all kind of looking at each other, and we're all kind of hopefully saying that I can too.
We've got the briefest moments left. I just wanted to thank you for such a brilliant, inspiring, thoughtful conversation. Like I say, we've not even talked about the fact that you just signed another book deal to write some fiction, some children's fiction, which just demonstrates how dazzling your achievements are. I'm so thrilled. Liz, thank you so much for joining us. The book, The Reset, is out now. And it's a beautiful book. If we're all stranded at home this summer, or maybe we're going to be down in sort of the park, look at that beautiful book. This is going to be the book that signals to your fellow park goers that you are a thoughtful and intelligent, forward-looking person. So make sure you grab yourself a copy of that on Amazon today. Thank you, Liz.
So much, Bruce. I just want to say you're honestly like a real inspiration, and I do appreciate everything that you just like champion people. And thank you so much for this wonderful chat.